One of the most important jobs that a farmer has to do on his farm every fall is pick the right seed for next year. And it seems like it gets earlier and earlier. Guys are ordering seed in July and August a lot of times anymore before the crop even comes off. But I'm sure you're out there harvesting corn or soybeans right now and you're thinking a lot about, well, I like this variety, I don't like that variety. Let's talk about seed selection today.
Well, there's so many choices anymore. I remember back when we were growing up, Dad really didn't have that many choices as to what he was going to plant. Like for corn, for example, he would plant the same hybrid for 5 years in a row.
Well, he had choices, but the thing is there weren't that many new products that came out. So the life cycle of a corn hybrid was probably something like 5 to 8 years. Today, the life cycle of a corn hybrid is about a year and a half. So they're changing that fast.
About a minute and a half,
and for soybeans, it's less than that. Honestly, for soybeans, the life cycle is maybe a year and a quarter. So you have to be taking a look at all these new products, and it's really difficult to try something on your farm and you say, oh, I like that variety. Well, then by the next year, it's gone. So how can you possibly make a good seed selection when you're basically dealing with brand new stuff at least every couple of years, if not every single year?
All right.
You
make it seem so intimidating, Brad. Really,
well, it is a little bit.
When it comes to seed selection, there are two things that you're choosing from. You're choosing from all the traits that are available, and you're also choosing from different varieties. And
Genetics.
It's very important to keep those two things separate, because just because there's a great trait doesn't mean that it has awesome genetics in it as well. Let's take Smart Stacks, for example. There are a number of new Smart Stacks hybrids that came out this year. Some of them are fantastic, and others were a little disappointing. And you think, well, wait a minute, what's going on? They all have this fantastic trait in there. That's great. That's one thing. You can control rootworms very well with Smart Stacks. You can control above ground pests very well. But if you don't have a strong hybrid with a good root package, with a good disease package, and that top end yield that you're looking for, you're not going to have a successful package out in your field. So you have to keep those two things separate, find great genetics, and find the right trait.
Well, here's the thing, though. I kind of look at seed selection a lot like stocks in the stock market. You know,
you want the monkey to come out and throw the dart at it, Brad?
Well, you want to get the best possible return on investment for whatever you're putting your money into. But the problem is with the stock market, literally, yes, to your point, a monkey can go out there and throw a dart at the board and pick the stocks better. And it's about the same thing.
So you're saying our viewers don't need to watch our seed selection segment, Brad? Because anybody can pick seed better than you?
But here's the thing. It's just like in the stock market. One year, one stock will be at the top. The next year, it's at the bottom. We find the exact same thing going on with a lot of different seed varieties. One year, one finishes at the top of the trials. The next year, it's at the bottom of the trials. So because you can't have the same variety in your farm for 5 or 8 years like you used to be able to, our suggestion now is, since you have to plant new stuff, that's all that there is, spread your risk out. Don't plant your whole farm to 2 or 3 varieties and say, well, this year, these 3 numbers were the best in the trials. I'm going to plant just these 3 numbers. You know what? Those 3 numbers will probably be the worst the following year. On our own farm, I don't like to plant any corn variety on more than 100 or at the very most 200 acres. And we'll usually have 1,300 to 1,700 acres of corn. So we're dealing with a bunch of different varieties. We like to spread that risk out because you just never know what's going to come up.
Okay, well, spreading your risk is one thing, but the other thing is hedging your bets. When you're planting any variety out on your farm, it's best to start with a good seed treatment. Using one of the high-quality seed treatments, whether it's Acceleron, Trilex 6000, Innovate, Cruiser Max, they were all fantastic on soybeans this year, and they definitely help with early season disease pressure. And that takes a little variability out of it for you, because maybe one variety is slightly better than another, but if you can protect that by putting a great fungicide and insecticide package on that seed at planting time, this is going to help you out. The other thing that we saw this year is some surprise diseases. It's just like the weather. Today we thought the wind was going to come out of one direction. When we get out here to film, it's out of the totally opposite direction than what the Weather Service had forecasted just last night. That you don't really know. It's just like disease pressure. Which disease is going to be a big problem on your farm this year? Well, chances are you don't really know. There might be something that pops up you aren't expecting. So you add a fungicide into the equation later on in the season. Use a foliar fungicide to take some of that variability out. Now, it's still important when you're picking varieties. Look at the disease package. Look at the roots. Look at the stalk quality and standability issues. If you can find those hybrids that, are middle of the road or better in those characteristics, then start looking at, okay, now that I have that base package, which ones are also going to yield for me?
I disagree completely, because every farm is a little bit different. For example, on our farm where we've got some of our soil just built up tremendously, I can take what a lot of people would have, where a lot of people would have a standability issue with one hybrid, and on our farm, it looks fantastic. So you've got to manage your farm a little bit differently. If you picked up some new ground, like Darren just bought a new farm last year, it's horrible in terms of fertility. He's got to have something that has great standability and a thick stalk. For me, I'm in a little different boat because I've invested so many dollars to build up the soil. So that's the point. You've still got to look at what's your farm like, what do you have for diseases, what do you have for fertility, and try to pick some varieties out that way. So yes, you want to look at that, but then besides that, spread your risk.
So the important thing is don't just look at a yield trial down the road and say, wow, that topped the trial, I'm going to plant the whole farm to that.
Right.
Because chances are it's not going to work out very well for you. You need to diversify. Don't plant too many acres to any one single variety, just in case some kind of disease problem or weather problem comes up that adversely affects that one particular variety or hybrid. Plant a few different ones out there. Do take some time and spread your risk.
Well, when it comes to risk management on the farm, you can always decrease your risk by improving your weed control. We'll tell you how to stop this week's weed coming up next.